Hello everyone. In the early hours of February 25, 1942, the city of Los Angeles experienced an extraordinary event. Known as the city that never sleeps, it was unusually silent. The streets were empty, the lights and homes were off, and a sense of fear and anticipation gripped everyone. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sound of air raid sirens, and the entire city was plunged into darkness as the power was cut. People looked to the skies, only to witness an unusual scene, a barrage of anti-aircraft gunfire lighting up the heavens, while military searchlights turned night into day. The relentless gunfire continued for over an hour, leading residents to believe the city was under aerial attack. However, the sky remained eerily empty, no planes, no missiles, and no signs of an enemy counterattack. All the shots were fired by American military defenses into the night sky with no visible target. Then, just as abruptly as it started, the gunfire stopped, leaving everyone bewildered. The next morning, Los Angeles woke up to cryptic headlines in the newspapers and conflicting statements from top officials. These events sparked questions that would remain unanswered for decades. That night became known as the Battle of Los Angeles, one of the most mysterious incidents in the history of World War II and the United States. To understand the context, let's go back a bit to the morning of December 7, 1941. On that day, America faced one of its darkest moments when the Pearl Harbor Naval Base was attacked unexpectedly by Japanese aircraft. This attack was part of Japan's strategy to expand its empire, as it sought to dominate the world. However, such ambitions required vast natural resources, which Japan lacked. For instance, it imported 99% of its oil needs. Its resource demands increased significantly after it entered the war against China in 1937. In 1941, after Japan occupied French Indochina, the United States responded by imposing severe economic sanctions, including freezing Japanese assets in America. This decision prevented Japan from purchasing oil, cutting off most of their vital supplies as a means of pressuring them to comply with U.S. demands. However, Japan refused to back down and decided to use force to secure the resources it needed. They prepared their aircraft and launched a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. This attack inflicted massive losses on the United States and revealed the vulnerability of American defenses, which had not been anticipated. The following morning, on December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before Congress and officially declared war on Japan. This decision drastically changed the lives of Americans, shifting the nation from a state of peace and comfort to one of war and heightened vigilance. Coastal cities began implementing strict security measures in anticipation of potential attacks. Anti-aircraft guns and fortifications were deployed along the shores, and regular air raid drills were conducted. The fear of another Japanese attack was palpable, especially with Japanese submarines stationed in the Pacific, making their intentions unclear and unpredictable. From Alaska to San Diego, American cities were on high alert. Secretary of War Henry Stimson warned that U.S. cities needed to be prepared for any possible enemy attack at any moment. In the weeks following life on the West Coast, things changed completely. Radio stations would stop broadcasting at certain times, and people got used to turning off the lights and closing the curtains to avoid being visible and targeted. Over time, the nightly blackout became part of their daily routine. Streets at night turned into deserted roads, with no sound except eerie silence. Even smoking cigarettes was banned in public to avoid their light becoming a marker for the enemy. As a result, the media dubbed Los Angeles the City of Darkness. Amid this tense atmosphere, rumors spread quickly, and people talked about spies in the city, as well as a Japanese group planning to migrate soon. The fear was so exaggerated that the U.S. government arrested all Americans of Japanese descent and placed them in internment camps until the situation was clearer. This escalation led some Japanese people, who had initially only planned to make threats, to take more extreme actions. Meanwhile, Japanese submarines were constantly moving along the U.S. coasts, and every so often, one or two American ships would be sunk. On February 23, 1942, the decisive strike took place, confirming to the world that American shores were no longer safe. On that day, the Japanese submarine I-17 surfaced near Santa Barbara, just a short distance away, unnoticed by anyone. At 7:15 p.m., the submarine's artillery opened fire on an oil field, with the shelling lasting for 20 minutes. More than 15 shells hit the docks and nearby facilities, causing widespread panic and fear, even though the material damage wasn't severe, and no one was injured. The attack served as confirmation from the Japanese that they could reach any point on the U.S. coastline. The next evening, on February 24, Naval Intelligence issued a statement warning of a potential attack in the coming hours. As a result, the entire South California coastline went on yellow alert, meaning that an unidentified flying object was near the area, and everyone had to be on full readiness. At a time when everyone was worried about a Japanese attack, something completely unexpected happened. When Los Angeles entered a state of yellow alert, orders were given to cut off electricity to all the streets. Since people had been trained for such procedures, they immediately understood that the city was in danger and stayed inside their homes. However, at 1:44 a.m. on February 25, 3 radar stations detected strange objects approaching the city. In a matter of minutes, the anti-aircraft guns entered a green alert state, meaning they were prepared to repel any attack. Soldiers began preparing their weapons, and after 25 minutes, radar confirmed that the target was just 5 kilometers from the city. Sirens sounded all over Los Angeles, and everyone was ready for an imminent strike. But shortly afterward, everyone was shocked to find that the target they had been waiting for disappeared from all radar screens and never reappeared. The strange part was that, despite the disappearance, the information center continued to receive reports from both civilian and military observers confirming that they were seeing strange objects in the sky. This left the military leadership in a dilemma: should they ignore the radar readings, trust the eyewitnesses, and open fire? Or should they wait for the objects to appear on the radar again to know what they were dealing with? At 3:07 a.m., the Coastal Defense Battalion received an order to open fire, and suddenly, the sky above Los Angeles turned into a fiery hell of smoke and flames. The sound of the guns was so loud that many people thought bombs were falling. Over 1,400 anti-aircraft shells were fired haphazardly across various locations, and shrapnel rained down on the city like rain. The huge gun searchlights were all pointed at the sky, trying to locate the enemy. But the question remained: where was the enemy? The firing in the sky was strangely random, with each military unit seeing a different target. Some said they saw enemy aircraft appear in the light of the shots, while others claimed it was a whole squadron of 200 planes. What was even more puzzling was that many military witnesses insisted there was nothing in the sky at all, and even those who were certain they had seen objects were not entirely clear about what they had observed. The statements were contradictory, as we mentioned earlier. Even the descriptions of the aircraft varied. Some said they were planes with structures resembling birds, while others described them as objects resembling balloons or dirigibles. In general, everyone was following orders and shooting, but no one knew what they were shooting at. The contradictions in reports regarding the shape, speed, and altitude of the objects added to the confusion. Some testimonies confirmed that there was a flying object over Santa Monica's coastline, which continued flying slowly until it reached the southern part of Long Beach. The object took about 30 minutes to cover 40 miles, yet not a single shot hit it. This contradicts another testimony from military personnel, who claimed they tracked the object, shot at it, and saw it catch fire right in front of them. Who was right? No one knows. At 4:15 a.m., military leaders issued an order to cease fire. The sky, which had been ablaze with fire and smoke, began to calm down gradually, and the calm continued until 7:30 a.m. when authorities announced that the situation was now safe. In the following few hours, news outlets tried to cover the event. Initial reports indicated that the military had successfully shot down enemy planes southwest of Los Angeles, based on a statement from an officer who claimed to have seen 2 planes explode and fall from the sky. But the strange part was that when dawn broke, Los Angeles residents, when they went out to inspect the aftermath of the battle, found no trace of enemy aircraft or bombs. What they found were only fragments of American military shells, which caused some damage to houses and cars, but there was no evidence of destroyed enemy planes. The reports of casualties due to enemy attacks were also false. While 5 civilians did die, it was for completely different reasons. 3 of them died in car accidents due to the chaos in the streets, and 2 others died from heart attacks due to extreme fear. The confusion increased when military officials themselves disagreed on what had happened. The next day, Navy Secretary Franklin D. Knox held a press conference in Washington and stated that the entire incident had been a false alarm, and that there had been no enemy aircraft. He explained that the whole commotion had been caused by heightened anxiety and fear due to previous events mentioned earlier in the episode. At the same time, Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, stated that there were no less than 15 unidentified aircraft flying over Los Angeles during the bombing, which caused significant confusion on the streets. Following this, the military leadership came forward to reassure the public, confirming that they were making every effort to uncover the truth. The global focus on World War II led to the events of the night of February 25 passing by largely unnoticed, but after the war ended, attention was once again drawn to the details of that night. Documents revealed that the U.S. military had already begun a secret investigation into the incident, gathering testimonies from both military personnel and civilians, which revealed many intriguing details. For instance, the artillerymen weren't sure if there was anything in the sky during the attack, which began after they saw a red flare hanging from a balloon over Santa Monica. Shortly after, different units began firing as well, leading to multiple contradictions. Some claimed they shot down objects from the sky, while others said there was nothing there at all. On March 22, an official document was released stating that the attack resulted from the presence of between 1 to 5 unidentified aircraft, likely belonging to the Japanese Empire. However, Japan responded, confirming that it had not sent any aircraft near Los Angeles that night. 2 years after the investigations, in 1948, a new theory emerged that gained widespread support. A former U.S. Air Force major and university professor, William Joss, conducted detailed research on the incident. He gained full access to all the military records related to the case and concluded that the cause of the event was weather balloons. There was a great deal of evidence supporting this theory, including the testimonies of 3 officers who said the target they fired at was a weather balloon. One of them had refused to shoot after receiving news that a balloon had been launched from a unit just minutes before the attack. This testimony was confirmed by a general in the military who knew that 2 weather balloons had been launched near the Hollywood area, which provided a clear and consistent explanation for the testimonies that described a slow-moving, round object. A lot of unanswered questions were raised regarding the massive bombardment. If all this attack was truly caused by 2 weather balloons, what would make the military fire so many rounds at them, especially when they posed no threat? Even if there was a threat behind them and they were just 2 slow-moving balloons, why such a massive amount of firepower from the start? The situation seems suspicious. In 1949, Colonel John Murphy, who participated in the investigation, wrote an article revealing crucial details that supported the balloon theory. He mentioned that the regional observer in San Francisco, upon hearing reports of a balloon flying over Los Angeles, misunderstood the situation and thought it was a Japanese-powered dirigible. As a result, he issued orders to open fire, despite not having the proper authorization for such an action. This responsibility should have been with the air defense commander, not the observer. Hence, the mistake was on his part, which led to all the chaos. The Army's own investigation partially supported this, but they never issued a statement confirming this, leaving the issue unresolved, with the public left to form their own interpretations. The main question that lingered in people's minds after the investigation was, how could soldiers with large cannons, trained to aim, fire over 1,400 anti-aircraft shells and not hit a single balloon? This question led to an explanation suggesting that the shells missed the balloon due to the difficulty of targeting a moving object that shifted both horizontally and vertically. Additionally, the dense smoke created by the barrage caused the illusion of multiple targets in the sky. According to the temporary commander's testimony, he initially believed it was a full squadron of planes but later realized he had been deceived by the smoke created by the shells fired by the U.S. military. Based on this, we can hypothesize that the events unfolded as follows: a weather observation balloon launched after midnight. The report about its launch was misunderstood, and the person who misinterpreted it thought the balloon came from an enemy direction, so he ordered the artillery to fire. Amidst this confusion, a second balloon appeared, and the whole situation began again. However, this explanation doesn't answer all questions, particularly the important one: how did the balloons disappear from the radars when they were visible in the sky? And why did the military continue firing when the soldiers clearly saw they were just balloons? What could make the military sacrifice such a huge number of shells with no results, at a time when every shot and shell was crucial? Perhaps this was just a smokescreen for the events, even though many people didn't believe in the balloon theory. Over time, especially in the mid-1950s and early 1960s, the story started to take a completely different direction. Researchers emerged and said that the Los Angeles battle wasn't a battle against airplanes or balloons, as was claimed, but was in fact the first public and real confrontation with extraterrestrial beings. They based this on photos taken during the attack that were published in newspapers at the time. On February 26, 1942, the Los Angeles Times published a photo on its front page showing beams from 8 large searchlights converging on a single point in the sky, with a mysterious object resembling a flying saucer in the center. In the same newspaper, Los Angeles Times correspondent Bill Henry wrote that the strange object withstood direct artillery fire. However, the contradiction here is that in the same article, Henry described the object as resembling a group of balloons flying in the air. Despite this, some conspiracy theorists adopted the flying saucer theory, and this photo became one of the most famous images in American press history. Many people became convinced that what they were seeing was indeed a flying saucer. However, years later, it was discovered that the photo published in the newspaper had been altered before publication, which increased the controversy. It turned out that there were 3 versions of the photo: the version published on February 26, which was altered, the original version that was never published, and a third version published after the war in 1945, which was also altered. These findings caused people to question the details of the photo. After being convinced that the photo showed a flying saucer, many people began to look for alternative explanations. During the investigation, documents emerged showing that British radar expert Robert Watson Watt had conducted a detailed analysis of the American early warning systems in January 1942. He discovered that the radar systems on the West Coast were highly inaccurate and had a significant margin of error in tracking paths. The problem wasn't only in the equipment but also in the training of radar crews, who lacked adequate training. Additionally, the technology at that time was very primitive. Radar technology was relatively new during World War II, and this could explain why the objects disappeared from radar screens even though they were visible to the naked eye. Many people returned to believing the first theory regarding the balloons, considering it the most logical explanation for the events, as the February 25 incident was viewed as a huge mistake by the military due to excessive tension and fear. The situation remained like this for many years until 1984, when the matter took a new turn. In that year, a researcher in strange phenomena named Jimmy Chandra received a videotape from an unknown person. The film contained images of pages from secret documents, including memos about the Battle of Los Angeles and information about a secret group called Majestic 12, a group specialized in dealing with strange phenomena related to extraterrestrial beings. One of the documents was a memo from the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, George Marshall, to President Roosevelt, written 8 days after the battle. In the memo, Marshall stated that the leadership had reached remarkable conclusions, suggesting that the mysterious aircraft were most likely from another planet. The documents also included another memo from Roosevelt to Marshall, where the president discussed nuclear secrets they had learned from studying celestial devices, and how the military now had materials that could help in developing advanced weaponry. In 1987, British writer Timothy Good also received a copy of these documents from an unknown person. He confirmed the contents of the documents in his book Above Top Secret, revealing them to the public. He stated that world governments intentionally hide the truth about UFOs, even if it means tarnishing their reputation in front of their own people, as happened in the Battle of Los Angeles. However, instead of confirming the conspiracy theory, the documents caused a split among conspiracy theorists themselves, with Chandra's group and Good's group each claiming that the version they had was the authentic one, while the other was forged. Instead of trying to prove the validity of the documents, they attacked each other. As a result of the confusion and the fierce attacks on the military, the FBI also began investigating the Majestic 12 documents and published 24 pages of them on their website, most of which were marked fake in large black letters. For instance, one memo supposedly signed by President Truman was found to have been pasted before the photo was taken, and another memo, which was supposedly written by President's assistant Robert Cutler, was shown to be forged since Cutler was abroad at that time. Ultimately, a group of people claimed that these documents were part of a disinformation campaign by the FBI and the Air Force, aimed at distracting those interested in UFOs with false stories, in order to divert their attention from the real secret military aircraft. After World War II, many people began secretly monitoring and documenting military bases, and the U.S. Air Force was concerned that Soviet spies might be infiltrating these groups to gather information about America's military capabilities. The plan was to make sure that when people reported seeing flying saucers, no one would take their claims seriously, thus keeping the real classified information hidden. Now, more than 80 years later, the Battle of Los Angeles remains one of the strangest events in American military history. Despite all the analyses and theories, there's still no fully convincing explanation for what happened that night. Was it a false alarm, with the fire being aimed at weather balloons? Was it a bluff from the Japanese, as some claimed? Or was it actually a real battle with aliens, with the government trying to cover it up? As the Navy's secretary said, perhaps it was all just a result of excessive fear and anxiety. Most of the witnesses who saw the incident have passed away, and with them, the true details of the event were lost. As mentioned in an article published in 2011, everyone can find in the story what they choose to believe. The important lesson here is that fear and anxiety can lead people to see and believe anything. In the end, that's the story. If you have a story you want to hear, feel free to write it in the comments. Any idea that gets a lot of interaction will be shared in the future, God willing. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video with anyone you think might enjoy it. See you next time with an even more exciting story.